Good morning. I'm out here walking in the woods and thinking about money. Many years ago, not having enough money to pay bills and buy what we need was the biggest fear in my life. I didn't realize it. I thought that being so concerned about taking care of things, paying bills, was me being responsible. It took God many years to show me that it was actually a fear and for Him to set me free from it. My point of view now is to realize that I have the privilege of making myself a bond servant of God. That's how the apostles like to introduce themselves in the letters of the books of the Bible in the New Testament. Paul often said, Paul, a bond servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. I think Peter did it and others as well. And so if we think about what a bond servant meant, if you look into it, it's actually very close to what we in the modern world would think of as a slave, but not the negative aspects of slavery as we think of it. Our culture today always thinks of slavery as being something wrong, something evil, because we think of slavery in terms of not having any freedom to do what you need to do. We think of slavery as something that always includes abuse and neglect and that kind of thing. But with God, we have many promises otherwise. We have promises that He loves us. We have promises that He will always provide for us and not neglect us. So if we make ourselves the slave of God or the bond servant of God, we have to realize that God is not going to do any of those things, those negative things, the abuse and neglect and so forth. As far as freedoms go, well, I think this is another reason why Paul called himself a bond servant of the Lord or a slave of the Lord, because he had committed himself to always doing what God told him to do. And so if we compare that to our American mindset of a slave having no freedom to do what they want to do or what we want to do, we realize something that's actually pretty significant. And that is that God desires and asks us to give up that freedom. He wants to tell us what to do all the time, to lead us. Jesus Himself surrendered that freedom. It says He emptied Himself of everything. I think this is in Philippians. Emptied Himself of everything and took the form of a bondservant, took the form of a slave. And then a number of times in the Gospels, Jesus told His disciples, I don't do anything of my own initiative, of my own desire. I do only what the Father does. So Jesus Himself did not do what He wanted to do, ever. When He said the Son does nothing on His own initiative, He was saying, I don't ever do what I want to do. I do what the Father does. And He said, that is what I want to do. So basically, He transferred His desires away from what I want to do and onto what the Father wants to do. So if Jesus Himself lived that way, God is definitely looking for more of us who are wanting and desiring to live that way. So those are the main things, at least, that I think of when I think of slavery in our modern context. And that's why those aren't really relevant if we think of being a slave of God or a bondservant of God. So what does this have to do with money? Well, the thing that God showed me is that a slave doesn't have to provide for themselves. They don't have to figure out where their next meal is coming from. They don't have to be concerned about their housing. They don't have to build their house or decide where or figure out where they're going to get the money to do things. Everything that they need is provided for. Now, again, if your mind says, no, slaves are usually mistreated and yeah, but they don't have anything. That's not the kind of bond servant or slave that God would keep, because God has so many promises to provide and bless and give us everything that we need, physically, material, emotionally, mentally. He is our provider. So I'm going to use the bond servant word instead of slave, because it's so hard to separate the word slave from these negative meanings that they have in our society. But if we commit ourselves to being a bond servant of God, then it is literally not our responsibility anymore to provide for ourselves. It's God's responsibility to provide for ourselves, because we are His bond servant. So for me, this was kind of an earth-shattering revelation. This is something that comes along with being the bond servant of the Lord. This is why Paul said that I have lived with plenty and I have lived with little, and I have learned in every circumstance to be content, because all of it was provided by the hand of God, and he had God's presence in the middle of it all. He had God supplying his emotional and mental needs in the middle of it all, no matter what. No matter how much he had as far as material things went. So that's the first little bit, and I'll share some more shortly.